All right. This video we're going to discuss sampling and different types of samples. No, we're not talking about Costco samples. We're talking about sampling in terms of like surveying. So let's get started with some vocab. Population. Population is the main group or set from which observations or opinions can be made. So let's say that I am trying to do a study on how JAMS students feel about math. Okay. Well, there's over 1,000 students at JAMS. The JAMS student population is considered the population for my research. Okay. Now, the sample is a small part of the population from which data is collected. So let's say in terms of the JAMS student population's perspective on math or how they feel about math, the whole population would be JAMS students. The sample would be the group of students that I actually survey or interview or talk to regarding math. Okay, I'm not going to talk to over 1,000 kids. Okay, first off, I'd probably go nuts. Second, I could probably make a good conclusion, okay, or a good theory based off of the sample, as long as I sample properly. And here's an example. If we collect data from 3 random students about Mr. K's class, those 3 students would be the sample, and the population would be Mr. K's class. Sampling plans. So a sampling plan is a strategy for choosing a sample from a population. So if I'm going to pick, let's stick to the whole research on JAMS students' perspectives on math or how they feel about math. Okay. If I want to get a sample from that population, I need to come up with a strategy for choosing that sample. Well, what kind of sampling plan would be a good fit to find out the opinions of students regarding the food in the cafeteria? This is a question that you would need a sampling plan for. I'm still going to stick to the math analogy. So how do you figure out what kind of sampling plan works? Well, when choosing a sampling plan, it should be representative of the population. Okay, this means the sample must have characteristics similar to those of the populations. Not all samples are going to be representative of that population. Okay, so they're not necessarily all going to be considered representative samples. So what this means is, let's take students' opinions of math. Okay, if I'm trying to make the populations the JAMS student population, which means every single student at JAMS, would it be fair for me to just take the geometry class at JAMS and just interview them on their perspective of math or how they feel about math? Would that represent the opinions of every single student at JAMS? No, right? That would not be a representative sample. So how do we figure out how to get a representative sample? Well, there's different types of sampling strategies, and we're going to look at 4 of them right now. In fact, these are the 4 types of sampling strategies that we're going to look at for the sake of this class. Okay. Now, not all of these are going to give you a very representative sample each time, but these are good strategies. Some are better than others. Convenience sampling, systematic sampling, voluntary response sampling, and random sampling. In fact, these words, convenience, systematic, voluntary response, and random, pretty much define what each of these are. Well, let's look at the first one. Convenience sampling. When you think of something that's convenient, it means it's easy for you to access. Okay? So a convenience sample is made up of people that are easy to reach or easy to access. Problem. Conclusions drawn may be one-sided due to convenience of the people in a survey. Okay? So this means that you might have a very biased result from only interviewing people that are convenient to you. Like, for example, if I only interview my math 7-8 students in terms of how they feel about math versus all of the other students in the school, or if I just sample the geometry kids because I'm the geometry teacher, it's convenient for me, but that sample is going to be extremely biased, right? They might think more highly of math, or they might dislike math because there's so much of it that they're doing right now. Here's another example. I live down the street from the library, so I'm going to survey people in a library down the street about how many hours a day they read. I mean, if I'm going to do some sort of research or gain some sort of perspective on how many hours a day people read, and I'm asking people at a library how much they read, I'm probably going to get higher results, right? In terms of these people probably read a lot more if they're hanging out at a library. So again, my results are going to be very biased. So that is an issue with convenience sampling. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it may not be representative. Systematic sampling. So when you're thinking that something is systematic, a system is involved. Okay, you're basically coming up with some sort of system or some sort of way of doing a different approach. Okay, so systematic sampling. If I want to be really systematic about this, I'm going to make a list of every single student at JAMS. Okay, a list is created of every member in a population. From the list, a certain number of individuals are selected from the beginning of the list. Okay, so I make a list of all of the JAMS students. I decide to take the first 50 students. And then, notice it says from the list, a certain number of individuals are selected from the beginning of the list, and then the person conducting the survey chooses every nth person on the list thereafter to participate. When I say nth person, I mean this n could represent any number. I could pick every 10th person, every 20th person, every 13th person, every 50th person, every 100th person. Okay? So again, let's go over what I just said this could look like for my research on students at JAMS and how they feel about math. I would go to the office. I'd have someone make me a list of all of the students at JAMS. Okay, from that list, I would take the first 100 students. Okay, those are the first 100 students I'm for sure going to be surveying. And then I'm going to choose every 30th student after that. Okay, until I go through the whole list, every 30th student, meaning the 29 in between, are not going to be surveyed. It's only going to be the 30th student every time. Another example, I can have a list of 1,000 people. I will survey the first 50 people, and then I will only survey every 50th person thereafter. Okay? Meaning I'm not surveying every single person. I'm getting a group. It's just based on a list. Okay? Next up, voluntary sampling. Well, when you volunteer for something, what happens? Volunteer sample is made up of people who self-select or volunteer into a survey. Often these people have a strong interest in the topic of the survey. The problem with this is that most volunteers are biased, meaning they feel very strongly one way or another. So if I decide to do a survey on how students feel about math, and I ask for volunteers, the volunteers either feel very positively about math or very negatively about math. The people that are in between, that are like, math's cool, but whatever, they're most likely not going to volunteer because they don't care enough. Okay? So the volunteers are going to be biased. They're going to really feel strongly one way or another. There's going to be no in between. And those in between people are important, right? If I do a scale of 1 to 10 and I get 30 people to volunteer and 15 of them are on the 10 side and then the other 15 are on the 1 side, the people in the middle aren't counted. That's a lot of lost data right there. Okay. Random sampling. Random sampling involves sampling a population in which every possible participant has the same probability of being chosen. Choosing participants randomly where everyone has the same chance of being picked. So if I wanted to just do all the students at JAMS in my survey, okay, I put all their names in a hat and I just choose randomly. All their names in a hat, I put my hand in, pull out a name, and I pull out maybe 100 names. Okay, those are the only 100 that I'm going to sample. That is random sampling. If I'm going to survey students in my class, if there's 30 of you in my class, I'm going to put your names in a hat. I'm only going to pick out maybe 10 of you. Okay? That's random sampling. You all have the same probability of being chosen. For example, if I put all your names into a hat to choose from, you all have the same chance of being picked. This is an example of random sampling. And that's it. Okay? So again, we went over 4 types of sampling: convenience sampling, systematic sampling, voluntary response sampling, and random sampling. If you have questions about what any of these mean, okay, if something wasn't clear, please, please, please ask. Okay? That's what I'm here for.